Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and mute all the lines.
The conference has been muted.
And Kayla from Senator Haywood's office, can I just test your audio again really quickly? Oh, hang on a second. Let me try that again. All right, Kayla.
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and I do want
Great.
to correct myself. The last four he will be calling in from are the 4628.
4628. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and get started. And Kayla, you can speak up when Senator calls in, and I will unmute that line.
Okay.
So again, thank you for joining us. Today we want to talk about a state legislative update. And just to go through our agenda, we're going to talk about the new legislation to expand PHARE. We're going to have a special guest speaker, Senator Haywood, who is the lead the prime sponsor of that legislation. And then we're going to give an update on what's going on with the state housing tax credit. We're going to review over some things about Home Matters Day, and I have a couple of things to comment on at the federal level. So we'll go ahead and get started talking about PHARE, and then when Senator Haywood joins us, he'll jump in. So for those of you who don't know, which I don't think is many of you, but just in case we have some new folks on the phone, PHARE is the Pennsylvania Housing Affordability and Rehabilitation Enhancement Fund. And essentially that's the State Housing Trust Fund. It is funded through several different sources, but the primary source is the realty transfer tax. It's a percentage that automatically gets set aside for this fund, and it's currently capped at $25 million annually. Now, the reason why this fund is particularly important is because it is the most flexible dollars that we have to fund affordable housing, reducing blight, and increasing home ownership amongst low-income people in the state. Almost 400 projects have been funded in 60 of Pennsylvania's 67 counties since 2012. And it supports a variety of needs, from new construction to helping first-time home buyers to blight remediation to homeless assistance. Really, it's flexible. It allows local communities to determine and then use the funds to address the needs that they really need. They really have. And $78 million has been invested into PHARE since 2012. And economic analysis shows that that's produced $500 million or $500 million in leverage dollars. So that means for all the money that we invest, it's creating more tax revenue for the state. Secondly, economic analysis shows that in the first 3 years alone, PHARE funding created 500 jobs. So this is a fund that is really effective. It's an important investment to make in the state because we know about the shortage of affordable housing, and it's really oversubscribed. Approximately for every 4 projects that apply for PHARE funding, only 1 gets approved because there's so much need. And so that's why we're proposing, and we're really happy to see legislation introduced by Senator Haywood that would lift the cap on PHARE. If there were no cap in the last budget year, $9 million more would have gone into the fund. And that's really important because that's $9 million more dollars that would have gone to all of the uses that we have seen thus far. And we anticipate that as the real estate market continues to grow, more dollars would be invested every year, and that means that low-income people could also benefit from the growing economy. So this is a pretty simple legislative proposal. It lists the cap on the PHARE funding. It doesn't change anything about the fund itself. It just allows more money to come into it. And like I said, this bill was introduced last week on Thursday, so it's hot off the presses. And we anticipate that it will move through committee in the next few months, ideally before our advocacy day on June 4th, but that might be what we're talking about and pushing for on June 4th for Home Matters. So Kayla, I'll pause here to see if you've heard anything.
That I haven't regarding when the committee will bring it up for vote. I'm not sure. I will be poking around a little bit to see when we can. But recently the committee has changed hands. I believe the new person in charge is Senator Brooks. So,
I think it's Senator Judy Ward.
I'm sorry, you're right, Judy Ward. So I haven't reached out to her office yet. We just found out the news yesterday. So once I find out, I'll let everyone know.
Great. So just butt in whenever Senator Haywood calls in and I'll stop talking.
Will do.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to our other legislative priority, which is the state housing tax credit. So we talked a lot about this on the legislative briefing in February. So I won't go into too much detail, but just in case you're new, the state housing tax credit is modeled after the federal housing tax credit program, and it would create a state tax credit to create private investment in affordable rental housing. This is also something that's very oversubscribed in Pennsylvania, and so it provides that additional tool in our toolbox to fund affordable rental housing. That bill has actually been progressing along through the legislature. It's already passed out of the Urban Affairs Committee unanimously, and is currently waiting to pass out of appropriations in the Senate, which is the next step. The bill number for that bill is SB 30. And so we're currently talking to members of the Appropriations Committee to work on having that pass out of that committee. From there, it would move on to the floor for a floor vote. That could potentially happen around the time of Home Matters Day as well. And so we'll be talking about that. And then once it passes out of the Senate, if it does, then it would go over to the House Urban Affairs Committee and ideally move through the House. Those are the two legislative priorities that we're going to focus on for Home Matters Day. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Gail to talk a little bit about the details for Home Matters. So I'm going to unmute for a second so that Gail can jump in and talk about that.
Can you hear me?
Oh, Gail, you're here. Oh, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Gail Schwartz. I'm the Associate Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives here at the Housing Alliance. I'm based out of our Pittsburgh office. And I'm here to talk to you about Home Matters Day and just give you a brief outline of what you can expect the day of. We will have our day begin in the rotunda at 9:30. We will have our check-in table up and running. When you check in, what will happen is you will get connected with your team captain. We will have packets ready for all of the folks that are going to be participating in the legislative visits. There will be packets for people to have for themselves, as well as pre-made packets that will be given to the legislators or staffers that you will be meeting with. And so it's going to include information about the two pieces of legislation that Lovana was talking about, Senate Bill 30, which is going to be creating the state housing tax credit, and Senate Bill 31, which will be expanding PHARE. From 10 o'clock to 11:30, we are going to be have that time blocked out for pre-scheduled meetings. We're prioritizing having our members come and meet with their state senators. So we're looking for each team to have 2 meetings. And like I said, that will most likely be between 10 o'clock and 11:30. For some of our teams that are traveling much further, we may potentially schedule a meeting after the press conference. So from 10 to 11:30 is meetings. At 11:30 to 12, we are hoping to have everybody come back to the rotunda from their meetings and listen to the press conference. That will be for about a half hour. And then after the press conference, there will be lunch provided. It'll be in Senate Hearing Room 2 in the North Office. Like I said, for our teams that do have to travel a little bit further, we may have a meeting scheduled, but for the most part, folks can walk over to this particular hearing room at noon. We will have lunch provided. We usually like to have a debrief. What are people learning from their meetings, and just sharing with us about the experience. After that, we do have a block of time from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock where folks can schedule any additional meetings. Like I said, we at the Housing Alliance are going to prioritize scheduling meetings with state senators, but for everybody who's making the drive into Harrisburg, we do not want to discourage you from taking time to meet with your representatives on the House side as well, and any other meetings that you think would be of value. So as long as you let us know at least a week in advance, we will be able to prepare any additional packets for any additional meetings that you schedule. So as long as you're coordinating with us, we should be able to help produce any additional materials to help support those meetings. So that'll be from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So some things that you can expect leading up to the meeting. We already have 50 people registered, which is fantastic. We're so excited. And on May 22nd, we are going to have a webinar that is going to be in preparation of the day itself. In this webinar, we're going to review in detail what's going to be in your handout packets. We'll also, again, give any of the latest updates on where each pieces of this legislation sits, and we'll give just a quick overview on, tips to have a successful legislative meeting, answer any questions, that sort of thing. And then at that point, we will have all of the teams kind of organized, and we'll be able to let you know who's going to be on your team, as well as who the team leader is. And so with that, I would like to make a pitch for volunteers to be team leaders. Team leaders are typically the person who opens up the meeting will state the ask and will help sort of facilitate the conversation and make sure that whether you're meeting with a legislator or a staff person, that they get all of the informational materials needed. So with that, I am going to hand it back over to you, Lavada, and then I'm happy to take any questions at the end of the meeting.
Sure. So why don't we pause here and see what questions people have about state legislation. If you do have a question, you can press *7 to unmute yourself. And we'll take some questions about state, and then we'll move over to federal updates. And Kayla, if Senator Haywood calls in, just interrupt us and let us know, and we'll let him talk.
He actually is on the line now.
Oh, okay.
So if you give me one moment, does he need to push what is it, *7?
*7.
All right, let me try to get a hold of him. Senator, if you can please push *7.
Hello?
Hello, welcome.
Hi, this is Art Haywood.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. Sorry,
Thanks
I got
for
on
joining
later
us.
than anticipated. Oh, glad to.
The
I
floor
know
is
there's
yours.
some discussion of the PHARE legislation. I'm glad to say that we have myself as well as Senator Elder Vogel, who's a Republican, as the co-sponsors, so we have bipartisan support, and that's important. We currently have about 17 or 18 co-sponsors of the legislation in the state Senate, and that includes a fair number of Republicans and Democrats. So we're starting off with bipartisan support, and that's important. Now, this legislation, I think, is critical for the Commonwealth because right now, the ability of the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to approve and support highly qualified, really good projects is limited by the housing trust limitations of the law that we initially created. So now we're trying to get off the cap of $25 million. That was a limitation on the quality projects that can be approved. We're trying to change that limitation so that more high-quality housing projects can be approved. For 30 years, I have been a lawyer representing organizations doing affordable housing, and it's all critical work. Even most recently in my district, the PHARE program provided $400,000 for repairs of homes of retirees in a neighborhood which is high home ownership, but also high retirees who don't have the money to continue to do the critical repairs to keep up their homes. So this is a program that provides for a variety of creative, affordable housing ideas that are needed throughout the state. And so when you come to Harrisburg for Lobby Day, I just want to encourage you to share stories on the need for affordable housing to the senators. I can tell you that these individual stories of persuasion, individual stories do work. We got medical marijuana passed because of the moms. We've got some changes to gun laws because of the survivors. So your voice does count. Are there any questions regarding where we are in terms of, let me just say in terms of legislative process? Again, we've got a good group of co-sponsors. Now, you know the legislative process can sometimes be protracted, but I think this is a piece of legislation that we can get past this session.
Great. Well, thank you, Senator Hayter. We really appreciate your support on this. And we are having our Advocacy Day on June 4th. And so I highly recommend that everyone register and attend and come talk about the FARE projects that are going on in your counties, and talk about the FARE projects that you want to do but can't do because there's not enough money in the fund. I think both of those stories are really important. And I just wanted to say again that if people do have questions, you can press *7 to unmute yourself. And Senator Haywood, you're welcome to stay with us as long as you're able. Or I know you have to go back to session.
Yeah.
So if you have to go, that's fine too.
Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for the advocacy. Sometimes they say that you can't fight City Hall, but organized people across the state can get legislation passed. I've seen it happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so if people have questions, you press *7 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, the $9 million increase if the cap is released. How did you come up with that calculation?
Well, currently, FARE funding is based on a percentage of the realty transfer tax, but it's capped at $25 million. So we would get like a certain percentage of the total, and previous budget years, that percentage was always less than $25 million. But this past budget year, if we had just gotten the straight percentage, it would have been 25 plus 9 million, which is 34 million, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? And you can press *6 to remute yourself. All right, well, I will stop here and do a quick federal update, and then we'll see if we have any questions about that, and we'll wrap up. So on the federal level, the most important thing that's going on right now are budget negotiations. And it looks like most of the programs that we care about are going to get level funding from the previous budget year with a few exceptions, and we're working on those. But the big picture, most important question is whether or not Congress will lift the spending caps that currently exist based on Budget Control Act of 2011. So some of you may remember that back in 2011, there was a very intense budget negotiation that caused what they called sequestration, which basically caps spending at the levels from that year indefinitely unless Congress lifts those budget caps actively in the budget process. And that means that all of these programs that we care about, like CDBG and National Housing Trust Fund, basically anything you can think of that helps low-income people, is going to be capped at 2011 levels unless Congress actively decides not to do that. And so we know that most of these programs are already underfunded, and we want Congress to lift those caps. So the most important thing I think that all of us could be doing right now is contacting our new House members and talking about how federal dollars help you and your communities, and how the House could really be very influential in making sure those caps get lifted. And there's an action on the National Low Income Housing website that I'm going to share with everyone after this call that I recommend your group sign on to, or you can do as an individual. And if you are talking to your members of Congress, this is something I would recommend focusing on. Beyond that, all of the budget negotiations that are going on really don't matter as much unless we could lift these caps, and then we could have real conversations about what the need really is and what levels of funding should be. So I'm just going to stop there and see if anyone has any questions about that or questions about Home Matters Day or things that are going on at the state level, and then we'll wrap up for today. So again, you can press *7 to unmute yourself, and I'll take any last questions. All right, well, if with no questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again to Senator Haywood and his staff for joining us today, and we're really looking forward to working with you to get more funding for PHARE. Everyone have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.